Speaking of math, you guys have your football 100. And it's not the first time in any sport, or in the NFL for that matter, because we just had the 100th anniversary a couple of years ago as well, where we try to rank the top 100 players. It's difficult, though, with the changing eras and the way the game is played now as opposed to the way it was even 10 years ago or 20 or 50 or 100 years ago. How did you guys grapple with ranking players, considering for so many of them, they played a vastly different game than the one we have now?
Yes. So looking at the list of 100, there are 19 quarterbacks and there are 14 running backs. So that is showing you positional importance was mattering. In the old game, running backs were a bigger part of how you won the game, right? So Jim Brown's number 2. Now, in the last 50 years or so, 45 years, it's been quarterback. The era stuff to me is hard to solve with linemen and some positions, but I thought it's kind of fun to solve at like running back and wide receiver. And so the way I did it, I'll tell you, like with receivers, I kind of looked at all the great receivers and I learned that we should really be measuring about 8 seasons for a wide receiver. So you're going to have about 8 elite seasons if you're really good. So that doesn't mean your first 8 seasons. What I did was I took every receiver in history. I had like a 30,000 row export of data. And I took their 8 best seasons in relation to their peers in a given year for receiving yardage. So if you led the league in receiving in 1985, that to me is the same as leading the league in receiving in 2007. It doesn't mean we're saying that 2007 and 85 are the same, but we're measuring you again. How great were you compared to your peers, right? So when I did that for the top 8 seasons of all the receivers, Jerry Rice and Don Hutson were number 1 because they led the league in receiving like 6-7 times. Randy Moss was number 3 if we averaged out kind of where he was in his 8 best seasons relative to his peers. Surprise here, Torrey Holt was number 4. Steve Largent, Julio Jones, Marvin Harrison, James Lofton, Larry Fitzgerald, Reggie Wayne. We heard from Michael Irvin. I think he was 14th or 15th when I did that. So I used that to kind of inform how we were going to put them on this list. They didn't all make it, but did the same thing at running back. And really, it was just scrimmage yards for the top rushers. So Marshall Faulk was pretty high because he affected the game in more than one way, obviously, not just a rusher. So I thought that's a fun way to do it, just measuring against your peers in yardage, which is a pretty good measure.
I love it. But you said Torrey Holt there, who I'll admit here is a friend. He is I
like him too.
He's not in the Hall of Fame yet, but Isaac Bruce is, Orlando Pace is, Kurt Warner is, Marshall Faulk is. Now you can't put everyone from the Greatest Show on Turf in. You already have 4. Jackie Slater 5. So he would be the 6th if he were to get in. Yet he's not in your top 100, even though you just said that using your metric, the way you rank receivers, he's 4. Why?
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So I think I'm on the Hall of Fame committee. He will get in. He's gotten close, and that just happens at wide receiver. We have guys come up against each other that they don't all get in for a while. Then they sort of take their turns getting in. He'll get in. I think he's underappreciated because he didn't have as long of a career. He wasn't around as long, but when you really look at the seasons he did play, they were all elite. So I think some of that just has to be bridged in our mind of like, hey, his elite production's as good as almost anyone's elite production in the history of the league. When we did this list initially, I didn't have that research done. In the end, I wasn't necessarily sure where to do it. The receivers that we have on there are a mix. It's not just going off of this strictly, but we did move Julio Jones probably higher than we would have had him because of this. He's at 56. I think who else did we move on? Oh, Steve Largent, I think, was somebody who retired as the all-time leader in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns, which has only been done a few times. So he definitely needed to be on the list. But there were a few guys up there. Like when I did that measure of the elite production, there were some surprising guys. Like we said, Holt was high. Jimmy Smith came in at 13 between T.O. and Calvin Johnson.
Wow, Jaguars Jimmy Smith.
Jaguars Jimmy Smith. So what I'm saying is there's no final list that's absolutely 100% correct, right? You can't do it. but the learning, like these are all things I'm kind of synthesizing in my mind as I think of these guys. You don't want to just rely on stats, but I think I've come closer to at least contextualizing the elite performance at the position. And this says maybe Torrey Holt should be part of that. Maybe Torrey Holt should be rethought. I covered him. I like him as well, and I've advocated for him for the Hall of Fame. He ended up not being one of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 9 wide receivers on here: Jerry Rice, Don Hudson, Randy Moss, Julio, Largent, Lance Allworth, Lenny Moore, Crazy Legs, Hirsch, and Paul Warfield. So that spans the eras. We tried to be fair, but we definitely left off some guys who could be on the list.
Well, my dad, the Browns fan, loves that Paul Warfield is in there. And again, the book is the Football 100, with number 1 being Tom Brady, number 2 being Jim Brown, number 3, Jerry Rice, Jim Rice, not that guy. Then Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, Walter Payton, Johnny U, and then the late, great Dick Butkus, who we just lost at number 10. Otto Graham, Dad, is number 11.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.